It was the English that had been in support of the Indians' ability to maintain a homeland. They were the ones who were trying to prevent settlement. The English were the rational people to side with. The Americans, on the other hand, were the people invading their country, that were taking their game and taking their land.
At the time of the Revolution, the Eastern American Indian was hardly a mute primitive. He often spoke 4 or more languages, including French, English, and Iroquois.
Joseph Brant epitomizes the cross-cultural mixing that's going on in the American frontier at that time. While he is an Iroquois Indian, he is also a Freemason. While he is one of the principal leaders of the Iroquois League, he also has been to London and visited the king.
Joseph Brant and his loyalist colleague, Colonel Guy Johnson, together would launch some of the most vicious raids of the war, and likewise their allies would receive some of the most violent retribution. While Brant and Johnson raided in New York's beautiful Mohawk Valley, John Butler's loyalists and Indians raided valleys in western Pennsylvania. After the so-called Wyoming Valley Massacre, Butler claimed 227 scalps, while losing only 3 men of his own. In 1779 in New Jersey, General Washington learned of these raids and ordered the country of the Iroquois Confederacy to be invaded with total destruction of their settlements.
It became pretty obvious pretty quickly that the most efficient way of dealing with frontier situations was to have an overwhelming body of men march into the region and physically destroy the communities, the crops, and literally kill as many of the Indians they could get their hands on.
He embarked on a policy that would continue for years. Soon, the Mohawk word for President of the United States would translate as burner of villages.
Probably one of the most famous of these sort of anti-Indian campaigns was conducted by General Sullivan. He marched north along the Susquehanna River Valley in Pennsylvania into what is now New York and systematically destroyed all the Iroquois habitations in that part of the country.
Early in Sullivan's campaign, the American forces met the combined Indian and Loyalist forces of Joseph Brant, Guy Johnson, and Walter Butler. Nathan Davis remembered the encounter.
They commenced a fire behind every tree, and at the same time gave the war whoop. Not all the infernals of the Prince of Darkness, could they have been let loose from the bottomless pit, would have borne any comparison to these demons of the forest. Nathan Davis.
Sullivan's superior numbers and artillery soon routed the Indian and Loyalist fighters. Later in the day, one of Sullivan's riflemen found some of the Indians they had killed.
He skinned 2 of them from their hips down for a bootleg. 1 pair for the major, the other for myself. Lieutenant William Barton.
The Indians were certainly capable of similar atrocities, although Sullivan's main force received little more opposition for the rest of the campaign. 2 of his riflemen that Indians managed to capture were brutally tortured.
We found they was both stripped naked and their heads cut off. And the flesh of Lieutenant Boyd's head was entirely taken off and his eyes punched out. They're Carice Beatty.
With drums and fifes announcing Sullivan's approach, Indians would abandon their villages before his army arrived.
They had this very distorted view that Indians were savages, they were dirty, they were lazy. This is particularly poignant when Sullivan's men arrive at the Iroquois villages. A number of them are amazed to find that, in fact, they're very well-organized communities. They live in log cabins. They find a number of very large apple orchards growing, very well-cultivated gardens, and in some cases even domesticated animals.
By the end of his expedition, Sullivan had destroyed over 40 Indian villages and broken the political alliance known as the Iroquois Confederacy forever.
The American Revolution for the Native Americans does not effectively end. It bleeds into another war that becomes a war simply to maintain enough ground to live on. This war continues on until the very end of the 18th century, until America can effectively claim everything east of the Mississippi River.
Benjamin Franklin's loyalist son, New Jersey Governor William Franklin, was imprisoned in Connecticut on the 4th of July, 1776, the day the Declaration of Independence was signed. After 2 years, he was set free, but continued to be a devoted and aggressive loyalist leader. Franklin's daughter Sally, however, shared the political views of her patriot father. Even as the British attended grand balls in her occupied Philadelphia, Sally organized women to sew shirts for the Continental Army.
They sold more than 2,000 shirts, very good shirts, and Washington knew about this and congratulated her, and it was referred to Franklin, who felt very proud in Paris. So Sally's shirts got some reputation.
Washington accepted the shirts for his army in January of 1780, the middle of the most punishing winter his army would ever have to endure. Since the Great Battle of Monmouth in June of 1778, Washington's most demanding challenge had been to simply hold his army together. He was disappointed that the French seemed more interested in fighting for the wealth of the West Indies than fighting for the freedom of the newly United States. But the French presence had diverted Clinton, whose forces were concentrated in New York. At the end of 1779, Washington moved his army back to the hills above Morristown, New Jersey. He set his men to the task of building a soldier city of log cabins. They lived in tents until the cabin's completion.
The sufferings of the poor soldiers can scarcely be described. While on duty, they are unavoidably exposed to all the inclemency of storms and severe cold. At night, they now have a bed of straw on the ground and a single blanket to each man. They are badly clad, and some are destitute of shoes. Dr. James Thatcher.
In less than 2 months, they had constructed over 1,000 cabins. Now at least they had some relief from the unrelenting snows. But the snows made transport of food and other supplies extremely difficult.
We were absolutely, literally starved. I do solemnly declare that I did not put a single morsel of victuals into my mouth for 4 days and as many nights, except a little black birch bark which I gnawed off a stick of wood, if that can be called victuals. I saw several men roast their old shoes and eat them, and I was afterwards informed by one of the officers' waiters that some of the officers killed and ate a favorite little dog that belonged to one of them. Joseph Plum Martin.
Although Washington sympathized with the misery of his troops and lobbied constantly to alleviate it, he didn't share it.
Washington headquartered in the mansion of a widow named Ford, a beautiful house, but terribly crowded when his whole staff and his servants had to house with him.
Martha came from Mount Vernon to join her husband, as she did every winter of the war.
At Morristown, though he had daily concerns with his army, the social side of Washington emerges. We see him having afternoon riding parties with the ladies, and evening dinners and balls and dances.
This has been true of armies since the dawn of time. Of course, the general lives better than the enlisted men. So at Morristown and Valley Forge and other winter camps, Washington lived in a fairly substantial house, very often almost a mansion. The enlisted men accepted as part of the